Arknights Endfield has been out for about 2 weeks when I'm recording this video, and in internet language, this quite literally means that it was a decade ago, and that this video took too long to come out. Hi everyone, my name is Space. I am a long-time Arknights fan that's been waiting for Endfield's release for quite a while. This video is simply going to be my honest review on the game so far and only the game. I'm not here to talk or even add my grain of salt on dramas that's been around even since the release. I'm sure we've all seen anyway. I've around 100, if not more, hours in right now, as I was unable to get off the game from how much I was having fun. I've cleared the entirety of Valley 4 and Wuling, and both my factories are pretty much complete. For a 1.0 patch, the content is massive. There's always something to do that I admit can get scary at some point. Between the AAC, open world exploration, main story quests, and side quests, placing zip lines, leveling up your team, and now events are starting to roll in, it's just stuff with all sorts of things to do, some I didn't even mention. Unfortunately, I didn't record any footage of my own game during the first launch of my PC, but I was absolutely loving it. But don't worry, I'm not here to mindlessly gaze the game like a sheep. It has flaws that I believe can be fixed in the future patches, and I'm going to be talking about them throughout this entire video. The game is beautiful. Absolutely gorgeous, and the character models are really high quality overall. The details and everything that went into the Kara design and the landscape is absolutely breathtaking. I like how everything fits, how you can hear your operators interact with each other even if it does sound silly sometimes.
Talk's cheap, mate. Gotta put in the hard yakka.
How they appear and interact with you in the Dejong, seeing them operate it, and that's something that's taken directly from Arknights, although way more polished than Endfield, obviously. And does it feel good to finally have the base out of beta after 5 years and also be exported in the brand new game of the series? Well, hell yes it does. The open world is a massive success for me. It's fun and engaging, and you can get to enjoy really special and unique landscapes. It plays smoothly, and the concept of connecting towers and zip lines throughout the entire world is a really fun activity to do, honestly. Having these tools makes exploring way easier and enjoyable, even as you can encounter other people's facilities and even their science spots, which works just like in Death Stranding or Dark Souls series for those more familiar with it. And one really good point about all of this is that it's really well optimized. I personally have had zero lags or crashes that came from the game itself, and this alone plays a major factor in how smooth it is to play and how I'm more likely to love my experience. I have no idea what type of witchcraft they use for this optimization, but I know a certain engine that could only dream. We all know that the game's combat system isn't the core gameplay at all, but the more I started playing newer teams and learning more about art's reactions and how physical works, the more fun it became. Of course, it really isn't anything new or fancy, especially if you've played the Xenoblade games before, but it still does feel engaging to hit your rotations and be rewarded for it, as rotations and the way your controlled character connects with the rest of your team are going to be different for each teams. Granted, you can master a team and watch them go crazy when you play them perfectly. I've yet to tackle the endgame mode, as it isn't out as I'm recording, but I've had a lot of fun playing with Crisis and getting my trim medals with the Leviathan team, as it was the first ever built, which honestly was really fun to do. I still think some aspect of the combat could be improved. For example, I'm not a big fan of Yvonne's and Fluorite's gameplays. I don't think they're bad, I just personally think it's not really interesting to play at all. Sure, Yvonne does a lot of damage, but I'd much rather have fun than seeing big numbers on my screen from afar, if that makes sense. And since I'm still on the combat, it's probably an unpopular opinion, but some ultimates do feel a bit underwhelming. Well, aside from Ardelia, Lifang, Last Ride, Pogranishnik, Snowshine, Arklight, and Perlika, which is my personal favorite by the way, all the rest feel really weak to me, and the gradient color background plays a huge part in it. I don't care about how long or short the ultimates are during my gameplay, even if it's supposed to be nervous or quick scent, but having more creative ultimates for such animated characters would fit so much better in my opinion. Well, you know, I'm just nitpicking, but I do hope it improves in the future, as the animation in this game isn't lacking at all. Everyone feels so alive and full of personality down to their voice lines and ways to stand idle. Yes, this is just an excuse to have you look at Gilberta. I'm sorry, I miss my Angelina and I am grieving. Going headfirst into the story I'm going to be addressing later, the game stops you drastically with a few tutorials that aren't at all useless, but sure put a serious stop in the momentum. This alone isn't a problem in itself, the game somehow needs an approach to teach you its mechanics, even if it's done a bit hazardously further into the game, and how they tend to stack up really quick. The real problem is when they collide directly with the main story you're trying to focus on. Even if they're core mechanics related to the AIC, I think they would have been better received as a side quest or something the game sets up for you when the story cuts itself until you reach authority level 15. I've done all of them. All these tutorial simulations are great and teach you everything essential you need to know, as well as giving you blueprints to easily replicate what you just learned. The AIC is the most complete and complex thing out there. I remember being a bit lost when my factory first started running out of power. I'm sure we've all been there, but thankfully enough, there is just a simulation for that. I gotta admit though, for such important information, putting the battery tutorial in the basic ASC plan some players are bound to miss at first is a choice. Especially when you have a side quest with Andrea that teaches you how to make bombs. I mean, both are equally important, but it's definitely a choice. Alright, now the story. It's kinda the elephant in the room I try to ignore as it prompts me to say what I think. Maybe being an Arknights fan that's up to date with its story kinda plays into my opinion, but I like the story. And I think Value 4 was okay. Okay, hold your horses, I'm not done yet. Yes, the story has massive problems you cannot overlook, and for me, the biggest is the antagonist. Landbreakers, and more specifically Bone Crushers, aren't exactly what I was expecting. Simply because I think Chernobog arc and Reunion in Arknights make a good first impression. Sure, one can agree that chapters 0 to 5 aren't the best in terms of writing, but the antagonists we were up against were just bad guys that the game wanted you to hate simply because they're bad. They had reasons, some you understand well enough to make you sit back and say, well, shit, am I really the good guy for going against them? Whether it was the higher-ups or the few mercenaries you'd encounter, they'd all feel authentic and human in their dialogues, completely going against what you'd expect from them. I'm not saying Endfield needs to take from Arknights, no, as it is clear that it's only setting up its own world building while trying to make an interesting story out of it, which in itself is a good point. But when in Valley 4, the first thing that poses a threat is the Bone Crushers, which is one of the 3 factions of the Landbreakers now led by Nefereth, which is, by the way, potential villain, are the opponents I cannot take seriously in the slightest because they're just generic and simply, well, there. I can't get to care about the Bone Crushers when they're so underdeveloped and struggle to make me think they're dangerous, even with the vile crimes and gore assassination within their ranks you can learn about in a few files of the game. They just feel like pawns here to give you a bad guy you need to hate as a really bland narrative. So then, why did I somewhat like Valley 4? Well, frankly, it's everything that does not involve the Bone Crushers, and more precisely, I like the involvement of the Angoloids amidst the chaos. Compared to the Bone Crushers, they do feel a scary force, especially with the Blight. Take Origin Lodespring. Aside from the fact that this is my favorite zone visually, it does a great job at showcasing how much Angkors and the Angoloids are a force to be reckoned with. Had the admin not stepped in and give the people of Valley 4 that giant Originum Oak, well, God knows what would have happened. And just from the few things shown from the past here, Angoloids feel more threatening and dangerous, as they've been a never-ending threat for the past century and are still a problem for a lot of nations in Talos 2, Wuling having only 3 months left before getting entirely destroyed and consumed by the Blight, giving Endfield Industries a natural force of nature to fight back against in an interesting way. And what the story somewhat manages to do best is reveal enough information around the administrator, while keeping the intrigue around them, especially the Zeros Directive. And I will say that it's pretty surprising how Originium works and affects Talos 2 compared to how the Super Cancer Rock was in Terra. Honorable mention for Joan Frangy, seeing her desperate to find the savior she fell in love with a second time, begging Perlica for some time alone and trying to relive moments shared or that she wanted to share with past admin is honestly just heartbreaking. Only ever leaving her office and filled with joy when she's running around with them is the best gift Endfield could have ever given her, which is, again, really sad. I love this woman and I will stay a defender, okay? Alright, enough beating a dead horse, let's talk about the gacha system. Wait, I thought it was enough beating a dead horse. I like the gacha system. And do not think the 120 pity not carrying over is that much of a big deal. The rates are similar to Oreo vs. games. 0.8 chance for a 6-star to drop and a 50% chance to drop the featured character banner, except here you can lose your coin flips endlessly with no guarantee, aside from the one at 120 that is available once only and resets every banner. To me, nothing was wrong with this to begin with. The game simply encourages player to not throw pulls mindlessly at each banner, especially if you do not have 120 pulls to back it up. But it's true that Hypergraph has been doing mental gymnastics with how everything is worded, and this is in addition of the emergency recruitment, when all of this can easily be dumbed down and not made so complicated for no reason. Now, the real issue I have with the gacha isn't really the character gacha at all, it's the weapon gacha and how you open its currency. If you look out and get the featured character in your first stand, chances are you won't have enough currency to get the limited weapon and finish the pity. And getting the featured weapon is one hell of a gamble. 4% for a weapon to drop, while it's 25% for it to be the featured weapon. Again, you can lose the coin flips endlessly here too, which makes this specific banner really helpful to go about. The main sources for getting Arsenal tickets are through weekly routine, which is incredibly stingy. You get 100 Arsenal tickets per week, a few in the credit store that resets every day, but we're talking 5 to 25 tickets. The paid option of the battle pass, which can give you 2400 paid packs in the shop, rolling, or straight up raw Virginium. So your best option to obtain those is by far rolling on the banner, or you can basically fuck off if you don't want to spend pools or money, and that absolutely needs to change as soon as possible. But as they've been listening to feedback and quickly coming up with improvements and quality of life updates, I'm not really worried about that. I guess it didn't really strike me as shocking at first, since it's really similar with OG Arknights, but you're definitely going to take some time until you have a full team leveled up to their maximum potential, as resources are honestly really scarce and take quite a while to respawn in the open world. Not even talking about how much T-creds it takes for one character and their weapon. I had enough resources to invest into 2 teams thanks to the paid battle pass, but now that I've finished it, I do feel the shortage and building a 3rd team will wait for a while. The game is clearly designed for you to take things slow and not rush it. It takes a considerable amount of time to invest in any team you're trying to build, but I think it works fine with the way things are so far, especially when account and character progressions are really tied to the AIC. You craft gear in there and craft other stuff to sell your outposts to, then have more stuff that serves to make your character stronger. The gearing system is probably the most forgiving out of any other gacha games I can think about, except our glorious Nimbus company, which simply doesn't have one. It's quick to come by whenever you've reached what the game considers late game and is only grinding from now on. I like how the RNG aspects aren't at all present and are just here and there when you want to artifice or etch essences. And even here, you're always bound to level up a stat, as both these systems have their own pity, if you can call it that. It takes a while, but I'd rather this than farming 6 months for a single piece simply because the RNG is being a bitch about it. Progression does feel smooth with the involvement of the AIC, and it highly encourages players to come back the next day to sell your drugs for profit. And holy shit, I never thought I'd be saying this about Arknights ever. And it's a really satisfying process. Having waited nearly 4 years for this game and following its development up close, to me, Arknights Endfield is pretty much meeting my expectations and not leaving me unsatisfied at all. Aside from the story and the weapon gacha, it has given me more than 100 hours of pure enjoyment and fun. Criticism is always going to help something you love strive forward and become a better version than what it was yesterday. And this video is just a little thing I prepared for the license that has given me friends I could connect to, emotions, and tons of fun. This game feels like the perfect love letter to every Arknights fan, and the only thing I want for this game is to grow bigger and beyond. Thank you so much for having watched this video. The editing was honestly so draining and delayed the release of it way too much, but I hope you enjoyed nonetheless. Thank you for having listened to my yapping, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, guys.
I love Spacey. Mwah!